There's nothing better than riding a roller coaster and being blown away. Sometimes it's because a ride you hyped up met that hype. Other times, a ride sneaks up on you and shatters your expectations. Today, I'm going to count down the latter. Here are 16 roller coasters that surprised me the most. Number 16, Star Wars Hyperspace Mountain at Disneyland Paris. Hyperspace Mountain often gets a bad rap, and I think most of that comes from the years when it had traditional over-the-shoulder restraints. This ride is not glass smooth, and since it's in total darkness, your head does move around quite a bit. But that's no longer an issue with the vest restraints in the new trains, so that allows you to appreciate the most unique version of Space Mountain without any headbanging. This is Disney's most intense coaster, taking place in total darkness with some forceful inversions and surprising airtime. Number 15, Dragon at Adventureland in Iowa. This Hopkins coaster often finds itself towards the bottom of steel coaster lists. And the reason? The pre-lift. Yes, this section is awkward, and on one turn it does sound like the train will fall apart, but the rest of the ride causes no headbanging. In fact, it's pretty smooth. It feels like a classic Schwarzkopf with the 2 forceful loops and another solid helix. Number 14, Grizzly at California's Great America. For years, California's Grizzly had the title as the world's worst wooden coaster. Hearing that, I figured it would be brutally rough. That's the reason most wooden coasters get hate. But much to my amazement, Grizzly was really smooth. So what's the flaw? It was dull. This ride had no airtime nor laterals. So while it wasn't a thriller, it is better than its reputation suggests since it is comfortable. Number 13, Predator at Darien Lake. This Woody gets almost as much hate as Grizzly, and after I rode it in 2010, I agreed, it was pretty bad. So imagine my shock to get a relatively smooth ride on it in 2019 with pretty good airtime. And it wasn't just me, my girlfriend thought the same thing. There is a caveat though, I was in the very front and refused to ride it in any other seat. But this often maligned coaster is capable of delivering a good ride based off my experiences. Number 12, Zeus at Mount Olympus. Zeus is another Woody known for its brutal roughness. So with trepidation, I started in the front row, and much to my shock, I got a relatively smooth ride with some good airtime. So I rolled the dice and tried Zeus in the back. And guess what? I got another smooth ride with just as much airtime. Either I rode a different Zeus than everyone else, or it was recently retracted before I rode it last year, but I genuinely enjoyed Zeus. Number 11, Zamperla Volares. Zamperla Volares sends shivers down the spines of enthusiasts. Just look at those caged cars. They look like torture devices. But for me, I never found them uncomfortable. I'll still take the B&M Flyers over them any day of the week, but I do enjoy these zippy little rides when I've ridden them at Ride Playland, Coney Island, and Canada's Wonderland. Number 10, the Big Apple Coaster at New York, New York. This coaster's undeniably janky, but I do like it for its quirkiness and uniqueness. I can see how someone could have a painful ride in this Togo, but I was able to get the shoulder restraint well below my ears, which meant I had zero headbanging, and that's the key for me to enjoy a roller coaster. As a result, I was able to enjoy this coaster's great visuals, inversions, and terrifying near misses. Number 9, Goudurix at Park Asterisk. Considered by many to be the worst steel coaster in the world, I looked at the 7 inversion Vekoma Looper with fear. But I got a reasonably smooth ride. Not only was my head well above the over-the-shoulder restraint, but the coaster really didn't throw me around too much either. So I was able to enjoy my ride in this fast and forceful looper. Maybe they had some work done recently, or I just got lucky. And now it's time to transition to the rides that I expected to be good, that ended up being great. And with that, I'll start with number 8, Powder Keg at Silver Dollar City. Powder Keg looks like a family coaster. It has a reasonably low height limit and modest stats for a launch coaster. But the acceleration on this coaster is no joke. I thought the launch was as punchy as an Intamin hydraulic launch, and I do not say that lightly. This coaster has some great ejector airtime on the camelbacks, combined with breathtaking views of the Ozark Mountains, making it a memorable ride. Number 7, Superman at Six Flags Mexico. Having ridden the Morgan Hypers at the Cedar Fair parks, I expected Superman to be similar. I expected it to have some floater airtime, but to feel very controlled. Superman may have the same boxy trains, but this is easily Morgan's best ground-up hyper. This coaster has an extremely unique layout with a long pre-lift, a great drop, and several camelbacks with strong and sustained floater airtime. This Morgan hyper actually feels out of control. Number 6. Cornball Express at Indiana Beach. Cornball Express received a lot of acclaim when it opened in 2001, but I hadn't heard much recent news in the CCI leading up to my trip to Indiana Beach in 2017, so I figured it might have been past its glory days. Now, it was a struggle getting on this coaster due to long bouts of downtime, but I was able to get 2 rides and was absolutely blown away. This coaster may be small in size, but every hill packs a mighty punch. You get standing ejector airtime, which you experience in full thanks to those glorious buzz bars. Number 5. Cyclone at Luna Park at Coney Island. It was always said that the Cyclone was often imitated and never duplicated, but I was certainly skeptical of this classic wooden coaster. I always heard it was wild, but because of how rough it was. And when I rode it, I got a wild ride. Except I got a ride with crazy ejector airtime on almost every drop combined with vicious laterals. Yes, it jackhammered a bit in the valleys, but the trains are essentially sofas, so it was certainly comfortable. Number 4. Rutschebanen at Tivoli Gardens. Rutschebanen looks like a cute little ride. It's not overly tall, and it has a beautiful mountain facade. The trains also have a brakeman riding with you, so I asked myself how wild could this ride be? I thought the same thing when I saw how minimalistic the restraints were. But the brakeman is your friend. I got some incredible rides on this coaster and got some very strong airtime. It was frightening how strong the airtime was considering those restraints. Number 3. Quimera at La Feria de Chapultepec. Olympia looping is often considered Schwarzkopf's crown jewel, and while good, I thought that coaster was overrated. The loops were fantastic, but everything else was sort of dull. So when I saw Quimera looked like Olympia looping with 2 less loops, I figured it would be a worse version of that coaster. But boy was I wrong. Unlike Olympia looping, which has multiple mid-course brake runs to maximize efficiency, Quimera is missing those brake runs. This meant that you hauled through the layout. The positive G's in the loops were unbelievable, and the ride cruised through the layout unnaturally fast. I got airtime and laterals in places I wasn't expecting because of all that speed. Quimera was insane, and I think it's the most intense coaster I've ever ridden. Number 2. Osiris at Parc Astérix. Osiris is often considered the worst B&M invert. Almost everyone praises its Montu-esque Egyptian theming, but I hadn't heard much positivity about the layout. But this ended up being my favorite invert, and I've ridden all the B&M inverts except the one in South Korea and a few of the Batman clones. Osiris had a mix of forceful and floaty inversions, plus 6 spots of airtime if you ride in the back row. Getting airtime on an invert is pretty rare, so having it happen a half dozen times really makes Osiris stand out. Number 1. Surf Coaster Leviathan at Sea Paradise. Japan is notorious for its jet coasters. These coasters are often forceless and ride more like monorails than coasters. And I thought Surf Coaster was going to be one of those jet coasters. But Surf Coaster was different. This Togo was a wild beast. The coaster had a fantastic setting over the water, but it also was a long ride with some shockingly good airtime, forceful helixes, and great laterals. I ended up liking Surf Coaster more than the Megalite I rode just a few days earlier. So those are the 16 most surprising roller coasters I have ever ridden. What are your most surprising coasters? I'd love to hear them down below. Thank you for listening and subscribe for more coaster content here at Canopy Coaster.